thank you for talking to us about Colombia. We're gonna switch real quick to the topic of Ecuador, which always isn't too far, just because of how connected La Patria Grande is. Um, so I think it'd be helpful to do something similar to what we did with Colombia, sort of trace some of the historical roots of the left socialist indigenous movement in Ecuador, because there seems to be some interesting tensions that, for instance, we don't see in Colombia. Right, in Colombia, we saw Impacto Histórico. Both of you comrades were mentioning how diverse the different parties and organizations within Pacto Histórico are. And there seems to be in Ecuador a unity that's missing between the indigenous left struggles and the environmentalist struggles, and the struggles of what was the established socialist, democratic socialist left with Correa. So just to put it in context, we have someone here who said it nicely. 9 day of national strikes in Ecuador. So that's the context that we're in, and it seems like it's going.
Oh, we lose Carlos.
Hello,
We can hear you. Can't. Your camera's
can you
frozen.
guys hear me? Oh, I think I froze.
I can
Not
hear
you're
you.
good now.
You're coming back.
Yeah, you're coming back.
Okay. So just to repeat that, we're on the 9th day of the strike in Ecuador. So can you give us a little bit of the context of why are we here in Ecuador? And if you could start the sort of narrative, it's always good, especially when you're trying to teach or get a message out there, to paint things, I think, as a sort of narrative, as a story. Um, what happened that allowed Correa to get into power, and what sort of splits took place that ultimately led to someone like Lenin Moreno? We have these bugs all over the house; they keep bothering me. But also to the split with the indigenous community, because you had in the last election, I believe in 2021, Yaku Wadambel, who was the left candidate for the indigenous group, who, I mean, some have argued basically split the vote of the left, and created conditions so that Andres Arauz, who is the Correa candidate, would lose, and Guillermo Lasso would win, and now the protests are against Guillermo Lasso. So, what's going on there? What took us to the point that we're in right now, where we're on the 9th day of the national strike?
Mm, you want me to go first, Libre? Okay. So I would say I think where we're at right now with this national strike is due to the privatization that the Guillermo Lasso administration is pushing, because Guillermo Lasso is just a puppet of the IMF. Um, like Ecuador is a country, it's like very special in Latin America because they're a country that's dollarized, from my understanding. Like they lost their moneda, their national dollar, which was called sucre, um, and they lost it during this thing called el Ferario Banquero in the 2000s, the banker holiday, and that's actually how Guillermo Lasso became a billionaire, through that whole inflation that happened during Ecuador during the 2000s, and um let me just put my phone away. Apologize for that. Um, so um, the this whole protest started because of a organization known as CONAI. CONAI is a very old indigenous anti-imperialist anarchist organization in Ecuador, that goes back to the 80s. You know, they because Ecuador has like a very rich history of having um the indigenous folks there being politicized by the communists, by the socialists, in order to organize themselves for their worker benefits, and for also like their cultural to defend their cultural institutions. So CONAI is the one that called for this paro nacional. They actually historically have always called for these kind of national strikes, these anti-neoliberalist strikes, like they did in the 90s, where they've gotten presidents to resign. But now, towards the thing you were referring to, the split in the left of CONAI and of Correa's like citizens revolution movement that he had. Um, I have folks out here in New York that work closely with Correa's movement, with the Citizens Revolution here in New York City, and I've heard like certain critiques that even people who support Correa, it's like one critique is that Correa never really claimed himself as a socialist. Like he was more like claiming himself as a liberalist, like a liberal. But I mean, he showed that he was supportive of like pink tide leaders like Hugo Chavez, like Fidel. So and also Evo Morales. You know, Evo Morales always claimed himself as being indigenous and a socialist. Correa really never pushed that narrative from my understanding. Um, he mostly I like how a brother of mine's Ecuadorian brother told me like Correa demonstrated about how you could be a liberal and anti-imperialist at the same time, because he did get like a military base out of this area called Manabi in the Pacific part of Ecuador, out of Ecuador. Um, but he had like a lot of tensions with the indigenous movements, and these type of little like holes here and there has caused division, where you have somebody like a Yaku Perez, who's an imposter, which was told by many indigenous organization that he wasn't truly indigenous. He was mostly masquerading himself as an indigenous person. And also it's also known that his party, Pachacuti, Pachacuti is like a indigenous word, meaning like the change of like, it's like the cosmic change in the universe. It's like this is like Quechua. This is like Quechua mythology. Inca. So he was receiving funds from these CIA agencies like the National Endowment for Democracy or USAID, in order to do like it's basically like this sense of like identity politics, trying to weaponize his identity as a so-called like indigenous person, a water protector, against the left, which was Andres Arauz. It wasn't. I mean, they did this. You want to make parallels too to like Petro and Pacto Histórico. Like they weren't even like that anti-imperialist either. Like they were no more for like this. There's this aesthetic. There's this aesthetic of revolution, but economically wise, they're not communists. They're not like socialist. It's more like democratic socialism, like liberalism a little bit, but still, it's still a process. It's still a process. So, because actually they were trying. I mean, if they were successful, they would have brought back UNESUR, that was basically a political project under Correa that was started in order to have the possibility of creating a South American currency. I mean, like what we see with ALBA. Alba is more like a economic block, a culture, or like economic block, and UNASUR was supposed to be more of like this cultural block to bring more South American nations together and to have this formation of the UNASUR, which we're seeing the promise with Lula de Silva in Brazil. That if we won it in Colombia, we will be triumphant in Brazil. But Lula did say that if he wins, he's going to try to push for a unified South American currency, the way that Gaddafi tried to do that for Africa. Um, so, uh, so yeah, there was oh, that was right there. There's that article right there. So, yeah, there was a lot. There was a lot of holes. I mean, like Yaku, from my memory, Oh man, it was just I'm now it's coming back to me. I'm telling you why it's coming back to me, because I also marched with Andres Arauz here in New York City. There's a big Ecuadorian community here in New York City, and best believe that they're very involved in their country's politics, because Rafael Correa, under his tenure as president, he made a seat in the Congress for the immigrants. For the folks who are immigrants in the diaspora, to have a seat in their Congress. So here in New York City, they're very active. They have an office and everything. The La Revolución Ciudadana. Um, so uh, yeah. So with Yaku, um, he was actually kind of part of the whole, like, his policies were kind of like horrible economic policies. Like his economic policies sounded good, taking these aesthetics, like being indigenous or water protected, but yet still having trade deals with the U.S. While Arauz was more about having more open trade deals with Russia, China, and Venezuela, and also still having a relations with the U.S. Um, so and also, like, there was like this whole like this propaganda talking about how Arauz was getting money from the guerrillas in Colombia, the ELN. It's the same type of propaganda they try to do against Correa 10 years prior with the FARC. Um, but yeah, this also brings into Colombia, like how Colombia tried to, I think you had like the general secretary that tried to accuse Arauz of receiving money from the ELN, and as well as, going to Uribe. Uribe was like somebody who was kind of like the main architect of like Lasso's campaign, trying to figure out ways to say, like, if you vote for Arauz, Ecuador is going to be like Venezuela. And Arauz even, I mean, yeah, Lasso even went as far as to pay Venezuelan migrants over there to hold like signs saying, "Don't vote for Arauz." Oh no, you don't want Ecuador to become like Venezuela. The What's the other thing? No, and Lasso also thanked Alvaro Uribe. He called him the greatest, one of the best presidents of Latin America. There's a video out there like that. And this goes into like what Lasso probably is planning for. But like I also, I was gonna say, like, the plan that Lasso has had for Ecuador, um, like wanting to turn Ecuador into a narco state, privatizing, um, and also, like, there's this thing that I was told by one of my Ecuadorian comrades called Plan Ecuador, that's supposed to be similar to Plan Colombia, to start trying to create like military bases again in Ecuador. Um, so yeah, given all these different contexts, but I will say too, I think Lasso too has joined with the blocks that's been created by Venezuela, like CILAC. Like, he does go to the CILAC meetings, um, which is kind of, I don't know, I don't understand that relation right there, but um, yeah, I hope that provides enough context. No, I know I've been told by the comrades too that due to Lasso's like administration, unemployment has gone up, violence has gone up, and narco trafficking has gone up. So, um, yeah, um, that's so far, that's all the information I have so far to provide.
That's really interesting, and a lot of good context and info for all of us. I just wanted to add, I looked at Yaku's policies the other day. I was looking into the situation in Ecuador and kind of reflecting on the election. And I was like, I hadn't looked into his specific policies, like his economic policies. And like you said, they're all right wing, but they're all like they were all pseudo left wing. So like he had the idea that they were gonna get rid of all mining or get rid of all extraction industry, in order to, he said it was to protect indigenous land, but it's like, industry is what brings jobs, and indigenous people need jobs. And I assume, a lot of indigenous people would be against the getting rid of the mining industry completely, or uh, yeah, and then another one of Yaku's policies was UBI, Universal Basic Income, which for people who don't know, that was a policy invented by Milton Friedman. He called it the negative tax, and basically the idea is, you do top down, trickle down economics, but then you just have the government pay people like $10 a month or whatever, so they can buy more commodities from capitalists. You're basically just having the government pay people not to revolt under capitalism. So it's an interesting strategy of imperialism. I thought it was super interesting, the idea that they weren't just backing, a liberal or even a fascist or right winger. They were backing this sort of pseudo leftist, someone, disguised as a socialist, but really a Malthusian or liberal environmentalist.
I also it just came to me and I lost it right now. I just remembered something that was supposed to be an important. I'll come back to me.
I think it's important that you were able to make that distinction uh, between Yaku and the actual indigenous movement, and sort of expose them as the fake indigenous left, um, because the picture is still being painted that he's sort of the representative of that indigenous left, and that's why the sort of split analysis of Ecuador is somewhat circulating online. Um, yeah, and any comments, Comrade Libre or Yhamir? Oh, they came back.
Yeah, no, it came back to me too. I mean, no, he was like an op for the CIA. I just remembered like he had like Twitter accounts attacking. He attacked Venezuela. He attacked Nicaragua. He actually was like a supporter of like the CIA backed protests as tranques. He also kind of like insulted Evo Morales, like saying something about how can you be indigenous and a socialist at the same time, and trying to hit him with the whole like, socialism is like a European ideology type shit. Um, and then yeah, like that guy. I mean, in Nicaragua they called him Yankee Perez. That was a funny name. Um, but no, he did. I mean, he disrupted this moment that I mean, I also feel too that there's criticisms like can be given of the citizens' revolution of the candidate they picked, Andres Arraus. I mean, he wasn't a bad guy, but still, like, there's this. I don't want to say it like this, but there's this caudillismo that's so internalized in us Latin Americans. It doesn't matter if it's right wing or left wing. We need to have like a strong, a very strong figure that we can believe in to, to guide the nation state, forward. I mean, this is something that's like, I don't want to sound patriarchal, but it's something that's very implanted in our minds. Like we need, we look towards like a very strong leader, and Arraus kind of like he was a little bit too young, I feel, for the position. I understand that Correa wanted like more youth representation, but there was like something missing. Like this is my own critique. But uh and these same talking points, actually thinking about it, is the same things that Lasso was able to use against Arraus. Like, for example, Arraus is somebody who kind of comes from privilege. Lasso doesn't. You know, Lasso actually, he became a banker. He didn't have no college. He didn't have no university. He became a banker because of a marriage, like through connections of marriage and stuff, and then became like, a corrupt billionaire with all this scam stuff during like the inflation period of Ecuador. But there's a lot of the stuff that he used against Arraus and his campaign. Now, that's one critique. I hope, I don't know, I hope that the next candidate, if Ecuador has new presidential elections, is somebody like Jorge Glass, the political prisoner that was in prison because he stayed loyal to Correa's project, the Citizens Revolution. And hearing him speak, I feel like that's more, that brother right there has more like leadership, like more of that the qualities. But oh, the thing that I remember too is that last year, when I was in Venezuela, because I got invited for the bicentennial Congress of celebrating like the 200 years of the Battle of Carabobo, which brought Venezuela to its independence. I had the opportunity to see both sides. You know, like they invited the leader of CONAI, Yhamir Vargas, and they had youth from Correa's Citizens Revolution movement. And I remember having an interesting conversation with Yhamir Vargas, um, about Correa. You know, he actually was somebody who was arrested under Correa's government for protesting. I don't remember. I just don't remember the whole conversation like that. But he did tell me something about how he doesn't have a problem with the youth of the Citizens Revolution. I think Correa is a little bit different, but he doesn't have a problem with the youth. And actually, the person that brought that, like, because he doesn't, yeah, he was actually cool with Andres Arauz. He actually told his followers, like his supporters, to vote for Andres Arauz during when the elections were coming up against Guillermo Lasso. So uh there that whole relationship was reconciled or brought together, Jaime Vargas and Andres Arauz, was because of Evo Morales. Because there were when Evo Morales was brought back into Bolivia after being ousted, and they had an event for him. The people who welcomed him and that were there was Arauz and Jaime Vargas, and that's because of Arauz and his connection with Correa and Morales, and Jaime Vargas being an indigenous person, part of this very big organization in Ecuador. Um, so yeah, that's all I remember as far as like what I was able to understand, like as far as that contradiction. I mean, I think that's something that probably, this national strike can give them the opportunity to really like settle these differences at the end of the day, because we need people on all different fronts um to make change happen and to possibly create the platform for revolution. But that's just about it.
Comrade Libre, do you have any comments? I saw you just sent me an ad for the Ecuador movement. I'm gonna try to figure out how to forward it to Eddie so he can share it. Do you have any comments about the situation right now in Ecuador? Some of the
Throw
historical.
it in the Google Doc, Carlos.
Okay.
Um, so a lot of my so first of all, we want to highlight the demands, which is what I sent to Carlos, of why people are out in the streets, understanding that this is like a buildup. It just in this last week, unfortunately, it's really hard to cover a lot of things simultaneously as they happen, right? Because there was Colombian elections happening, as there's also a paro nacional happening in Nicaragua, as there also is a paro nacional happening in Panama. And so that being said, it's important to understand why people are going out into the streets, and understanding that el pueblo ecuatoriano, the Ecuadorian people, are continuing their fight. At the end of the day, it has to do with access to resources, and the lack of, right? So folks are asking, and oddly enough, looking at the list of demands for Ecuador, highly similar to that of Panama, right? Asking for gas prices to not be raised, asking for a year of debt, that there's not the accumulation of debt. And so what we can observe is in Ecuador, the military is suppressing the working class individuals that are going out into the streets, as well as we do not see a platform for working class Ecuadorians to amplify what they have been fighting for. Because this is the Paro Nacional is just we can think of it as similar to the 2020 uprisings, right? It's the camel, it's the, what is it? The straw that broke the camel's back, right? So what is happening in Ecuador should not be a surprise to anybody. If you are actually following what is happening in Ecuador, what we do understand is that it has gotten to a point where the Ecuadorian people are out in the streets marching, where journalists have been brutalized, literally. There's a video on our Instagram, right? Journalists are being suppressed to not share what is happening, to paint the impression that Ecuador is maintaining peace, when in reality the Lasso government is suppressing the working class Ecuadorians, and refusing to heed to the demands of the working class people. And so we will. It's interesting to observe this particular political moment in Latin America in general. We do have someone, one of our comrades from Troika, that will be there starting tomorrow to get coverage and a more of a on the ground analysis of what would be happening, of what has been happening in Ecuador. And so, like, again, standing in solidarity, we're working class Ecuadorians. It's important to understand the context as to why they're out there, and also the fact that oftentimes we will not hear about Ecuador in any on any platform, not even alternative platforms, unfortunately. And so we have to begin to also break this habit that we have, especially as those living on Turtle Island, of focusing on the places that are always like headliners, right? Like, we will always hear about Cuba, and we should focus on Cuba. We will always hear about Venezuela, and we should focus on Venezuela. We'll hear about Nicaragua. What about the places that we're not hearing about? Because those are the places, to a certain extent, where imperialism has its claws deeper, right? The fact that most people had no context of Honduras until they democratically elected Xiomara Castro, right? Her husband was overthrown, literally cooed by the U.S. government, dropped in the middle of a Costa Rican jungle, and exiled from his country. Why did we not hear about that when it happened? Well, because the U.S. interest was met. Right. And we can see similar trends happening throughout the Americas in places like Ecuador that you will rarely, if ever, hear about. And so that should make you question it more. Think about the countries that we're not talking about right now. Think about Guatemala. Think about El Salvador. Right. Think about Panama, and look into the news resources of those countries about what's happening. Right. Because, like I said, in Ecuador and Panama right now, you have two of the largest, historically speaking, national strikes happening in the history of both of these countries. You have a move towards the left without a platform to create discussion around what's happening. And so in Ecuador, it is big that the indigenous people are choosing to, again, take a sacrifice to uphold and to stand true to the demands that are being asked, to recognize their human rights, but also to recognize their rights as indigenous people to the land of Ecuador, to stop the private interests of businesses that are trying to overthrow the public use of land, of energy. And you see these things happening in the larger context, right? Last year, Puerto Rico and Brazil both privatized energy. A lot of people are not talking about that. That is something that similar is happening in places like Ecuador, where you may not even question something like that. And so we do have to be aware of things before they become larger issues. And we can't be everywhere. But when we do talk about things, we want to be specific. And we also want to support the working class. So we need to do the research if we're going to be talking about these places, but also the places that you will least likely, the places that are not in your mind. If you look at a map of the Americas, the places that you don't see in the headlines, please do the extra effort to look at what's happening in those countries, because the suppression is monumentous, right? The largest military base in Central America is in Honduras. How many people knew that before the Honduran elections? Not many, right? The biodiversity in Ecuador that is literally being attacked right now, not only by the Ecuadorian military, but also by U.S. interests, are monumentous, right? And we have to question those things, because if we understand capitalism in its totality, it seeks to extract resources from not only people but from land. And understanding that we're in relationship to land, right? An attack on the land is an attack against socialism and communism in any place where it is fought, because we are in relationship to Mother Earth, and we are building with the earth. And so we have to be very aware of what's happening in Ecuador, and continue to support this national strike, to share information from a working class perspective.
And I just want to add real quick, I'll let Carlos or Comrade Yhamir go. I know I have to head out here pretty soon. I have to give up my room to my roommate, as usual. But I want to say, I used to think, how am I supposed to keep up on every country around the world? There's so much to keep up on. And, once you build your base of knowledge and learn about one country, it becomes easier. Like learning about Venezuela helps you learn about Colombia, helps you learn about Bolivia. These things are all intertwined, especially with the current stage of capitalism that we're at, which is a global system of imperialism. But then you mentioned, something similar. You said we can't be everywhere at once, and we can't as individuals, but we can as a collective, and it's a collective struggle. And we've been talking a lot about sources, and where are good sources to go. And been saying the best sources are the people. Go to the people. So learn from your comrades, lean on your comrades. Talk to and ask questions of the most politically advanced sections of the proletariat, people engaging in revolutionary struggle, in whatever country you're worried about, or trying to learn about, or people who are engaging in international struggle, like Comrade Libre and Comrade Yhamir. I think you two are a perfect example of two politically advanced working class people who have been, forging yourselves mentally and physically in the revolutionary struggle. So now you have this vast wealth of knowledge. So, the best way to get through the imperialist bullshit is to trust some hardened comrades who have been fighting against imperialism for a long time.
And it's a process, just like revolution is the process. The process of learning is also a dialectical process. You're going to start with not a very concrete analysis, and it's going to get concrete the more you keep at it and the more consistent you are. But yeah, absolutely, that point you made about it, things about being able to involve the collective in the process of knowledge is just so important. And the point you made, Comrade Libre, about focusing on the places that are not talked about, that's really important. And one of the comrades that we've had on a few times, and we've gone on his show a few times, Comrade Ramiro. That's something that I think he does really well. And one of the things that we appreciate about his show is that if we have to plug another one, I'd say for folks to check out Comrade Ramiro Sebastian Funes, his YouTube channel and podcast, Unmasking Imperialism. It's superb. And specifically, we talked about earlier about the drug trade and some of the effects that it has, not just the billions that it makes for Colombian and U.S. capitalists, but the effects that it has on communities. He's had specialists, people who have written books on the effects of the drug trade on revolutionary music like rap, the rap atmosphere, and Black liberation movements and socialist movements in the U.S. So check his channel out. And like you said, Comrade Libre, check out the places that are not talked about, because that means that they have been successfully ignored by the mainstream media and left outlets as well. So any closing comments from either Comrade Libre or Yhamir Or Eddie, you as well. Why don't
Or
you speak
anything
first?
you guys want to plug either?
Yeah.
Yes, we have a comrade that is based in Ecuador. His name is Comrade Ramon, um, and he's been sharing content with us. We, like I said, tomorrow we have a comrade flying into Ecuador to get on the ground coverage and to give a Marxist analysis of the Paro Nacional. So you can look at our Instagram for more updates on what has been happening. And we'll continue to share our resources. I mean, the thing that works in our favor is that there is significantly more working class people globally than there are oligarchs, than there are bourgeoisie. And so we need to simply unite against our primary contradiction, which is imperialism, and to combat these imperialist lies. And the only way that we can do that is by supporting one another. And so we will be sharing out interviews and resources from Ecuador, from our comrade Ramon, as well as our comrade Elias, who's getting in tomorrow. So just be pendiente, be aware of Troika, and we'll be sharing that out on our Twitter as well. And yeah, we'll be sharing out more as we learn, because we don't know everything. We are in the process of learning, and we're in the process of also learning what we don't know, so that we can understand the what we're lacking in. And Ecuador is definitely one of those countries, because, like I said, y'all weren't talking about it in the same way that less than maybe 2 months ago it was not on our radar. So we can't be everywhere, but we do have Comrade Eddie shared, right? Like, it is about a collective effort, and then doing that necessary work of when we do want to talk about a place, doing the research necessary, and also supporting those that are doing that work, because people do specific work about specific things. And so thank you all, comrades. We will be watching the Paro Nacional, covering the Paro Nacional, and also amplifying the voices of Ecuadorians as they continue in their struggle until their needs are met. That being said, I'll pass on to Comrade Yhamir.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's important, like, like Libre said, we need to cover these countries that never get like any limelight. Like, we talk about also like Haiti, for example. Every time Haiti has a protest, there's a blackout. You never know what happens there, and that, I feel like that's very purposeful with Haiti, because Haiti is a country that's not poor. It's a country that's been punished because of its original sin in 1804, being one of the first black republics, being one of the first governments against slavery, and also one of the first governments to abolish slavery in the Americas. And the same thing goes with Ecuador. Ecuador right now, as you see, as the U.S. sees like its grip being lost in the continent, there's gonna be best believe they're gonna try to take advantage of the government that Ecuador has in order to try to experiment in Ecuador and make it into like a new bastion, a new Colombia, a new type of like bastion for their imperialist operations. Um, but overall, hopefully, the Ecuadorian people are able to achieve gains with this national strike. I mean, I do hope. I mean, I don't know. It might be as like having a pipe dream, but like they could possibly try to like overthrow the president or have him resign, and then we could have that socialist president Correa coming back, and then the pink or red tide is in full effect. We have like a whole curve of a red. So yeah, toda solidaridad con la República Hermana del Ecuador.
Hell yeah, brothers. Thank you both for coming on. It's been a learning experience for me, and I'm sure for Eddie as well, and for the audience. You guys have great knowledge on these topics. let's hope, as you said, that Ecuador falls as well, and that that Bolsonaro falls. I think October, right? October is when
October 2nd.
October 2nd. So let's hope
That's
that Lula.
elections? October 2nd?
October 2nd is Brazilian elections where Lula's going to win. And then we're going to be on the track to run our shit in favor of working class people in Abya.
Oh, wait, Carlos, you meant to say Lasso. To if Lasso falls, you said Ecuador
Lasso.
falls. Lasso, yeah.
Yeah. Well, Ecuador, as in the existing order in Ecuador, if it falls,
Oh, okay.
Lasso and the people come to power. And the same thing with Bolsonaro. It's an exciting moment to be a socialist. We have this beautiful, flourishing moment of left-wing struggles in Latin America and in the U.S. Honestly, it's in moments of crisis like this where we should be like, let's go. Now it's the time to get the serious work in, right? Because the American people are also disappointed. They're living in horrible conditions. I think half of the American working class is a lost paycheck away from homelessness. And it's just absurd. This is where the super profits and the resources that are expropriated and exploited by the empire come, and the people live wretchedly. So the interest of the American working class is also with the interest of the struggles abroad. And I think we should all come together. And in a moment like this, what best than to show that it's possible? It's possible abroad, and I think it's possible at home as well. And I think the duty of socialists in the U.S. is to carry forth a revolution here, and so that the revolutions abroad can be a lot more peaceful. Well, some of the biggest obstacles for revolutions in the third world, in the East, in Africa, has been U.S. and NATO imperialism. And if we're able to get these imperialist states to collapse through a socialist revolution, the revolution will arise in other places as well where we have prevented its flourishing. So it's an exciting moment to be alive as a communist, right?
Yeah, it's exciting, and it's a time to, like you said, get some serious work done. Imperialism is the stage of capitalism we're in, and imperialism is in crisis, largely thanks to all these revolutionary movements in countries that the U.S. has tried to keep under their boot for years, who are increasingly becoming successful in overthrowing the puppet dictators of imperialism and the forces of imperialism in general. And yeah, so it's time for us to put in that good educational work, that organizational work, and get serious about ending the empire. And I think our comrades from Troika Kollective are doing an amazing job at that. So thank you so much, Comrade Yhamir and Comrade Libre, for hanging out and sharing your knowledge with us today. As Carlos said, it was super informative for all of us. So please come back anytime.
Cool. Thanks for having us.
Peace, comrades. Hasta la victoria siempre.
Hasta la victoria siempre. Patria o muerte, venceremos.
Venceremos.
Love it.